I should be coming through, I hope. Okay, so I've got... and why is Discord sounds not coming through? I'm just going to delete it and start again. Ah.
All right. See, wait to hear it through my speakers.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go. There we go. I can hear me.
Right. Okay. We're on a completely different computer setup, guys. So like.
But you guys. But yeah, you guys let us know if you can hear us all. We're so sorry about that. We're not quite sure what went wrong. Thank you though for being so patient. You guys are awesome.
Yay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Right, let's get started. We'll do some quick housekeeping, then I'll mess with the overlay so that it's all up to date. Oh, sorry guys, it's
so sorry.
Yeah, we're on. So I'm on a backup computer right now instead of using the studio one, which is why the audio is a bit different. Okay, Zero G Podcast 2.
Yay! Take 2.
Couldn't have had a rougher start. Okay, yes, welcome to the show. My name's Garrick, I am the Zero G admin. I'm also the guy you probably most likely talk to on Twitter if you're talking to Zero G. And I am joined by Aki Glancy. Aki, do you want to tell us about yourself?
I am Aki Glancy, also known as Empath P. I am the manager and founder of Voc America, as well as being the voice actress of the Vocaloid Dinah and the illustrator of the Vocaloid Ivana. I make music, and I have a lot of fun with Vocaloid.
Wonderful. And I'm also joined by CN, also known as Crusher P.
Hey, yo.
Yeah, CN, tell us about yourself.
What's up? Hi, I'm CN, and I make music with Vocaloid and also without Vocaloid. And I do a lot of things, like writing music and marketing stuff. So I'm here. How you doing?
How you doing? I was so ready to say like, I'm Cian and I wrote Echo, and just be really silent again.
I tried to do better this time.
I was so ready for it. I was waiting for the running gag. Right.
Tune in next time for that.
Garrick's a little quiet. Garrick can't do anything about that at the moment.
Talk louder.
I'll just shout all night, shall I? Yeah, no, I'm on my laptop speakers, so on my laptop microphone. So
okay.
Yeah, I might be a shade quiet. I'm not even going to try and record my voice. I'm just
we're just going to leave it as it is now, guys, because those technical issues took up so much time. Yeah. We're just going to dive right into it, and if Garrick's a little quiet, we will make sure that this does not happen for the next episode.
Yeah, like next episode, I think we'll have to do another set of dry runs to really get it sorted. Mm-hmm. But hey ho, that is how it goes. Right.
It is.
Oh, actually, I can.
It's a learning experience.
It is a learning experience, but that's fine. So yeah, a bit of housekeeping before we start, or I'll say, bit of housekeeping before we start. As I was saying before the show, I've got loads of stuff that I want to tell you guys, and loads of stuff that is going on at Zero G. Stars didn't align this week, and I can't tell you anything. Apart from one is Vocaloid related and one is new release. They're both separate things, unfortunately. No, one's Vocaloid related, is really cool. I'm really excited for it. And the release is going to be a contact instrument. it's a really, really cool product. Really excited to get it out, but yeah, it's taking a little longer than we wanted. I wanted to tell you guys tonight, but c'est la vie, it ain't gonna happen. In other housekeeping, remember to use the hashtag ZG Podcast. That is the official hashtag, and we will be monitoring Twitter for all your questions that we are going to answer. Updated news, I am officially going to Miku Expo, so I will be there along with Aki, and we'll be doing a meetup in one of the nearby parks in London. I'll be there for at least some of it. Most of it probably is the answer. Yeah, I'll be updating the podcast. The discount code you see in the bottom right at the moment is not the official one. That's last time's. I'll be updating it shortly. But that gives you, it will give you 20% off nearly everything apart from Vocaloids. Now the reason it won't give you money off Vocaloids is because Vocaloids went on sale today and they are 30% off. So now is a really good time to go and pick them up if you're going to, because the autumn sale ends on the 1st of October. After that, like, it's shutting down probably until like Black Friday. It's going to be the next time you get some really good deals. So yeah, now's, if you want anything from Zero G, now's the time. And as I say, Vocaloids are 30% off. Aki, CN, what's going on in your world?
CN, do you want to go first?
Okay, I got a tattoo.
Yay!
That's been happening with me. What about you, Aki?
I have finalized my plane ticket and my Miku Expo tickets for Miku Expo in London. So that's definitely happening. We're getting ready for the last Vogue America show of the 2018 season, which is going to be in November at Anime EY. I think I mentioned this last time. Very exciting news. I'm not going to go into specifics, but we are having some major upgrades happening for 2019. We're going to go on a little bit of a hiatus and then come back in February with hopefully a big major update, and then continue to do major updates throughout the year of 2019. So nothing I can really specify, but things that I have seen. My boys are working on it. All my people are working on it. It's super, super duper exciting. But if you want to see our last Vogue America show of this year, before we start our hiatus and start working on these updates, come to Florida, come to Fort Lauderdale, Anime EY. We're giving 2 shows. And also I am arranging for a special Meet Empath P meetup right before Miku Expo in London on the 8th of December. It's going to be in Holland Park. We're meeting at the Kyoto Gardens section of the park, and then if it's too cold outside, then we will move to like a coffee shop, but we will be meeting there at around 3 p.m. or 1500, depending upon which hour definition you prefer to use.
Yay!
Yay!
Yeah, they're both at the same time, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Right. Well, as we are running so late, again, really sorry about that, guys. As we're running so late, we will move straight on with our main topic of discussion, which is albums and EPs, and sort of everything in between writing them to producing them, the differences, the similarities, why you should put more thought into what goes into your album than you do into an EP, and that kind of stuff. So, do you guys have any sort of starting thoughts on it?
Well, sort of. Usually when it comes to albums and EPs, the biggest thing that people usually talk about is the difference and what constitutes the difference in an EP and an album. And a lot of the time it seems like it just has to do with how many tracks are on it. Yeah. And so people are usually like, yeah, between 5 and 8 can be an EP, but I've seen EPs with like 1 or 3 songs on them. And then albums always have to have like, I don't know, 8 to at least 10 at least to be considered a whole album, and or more. So it's very interesting because that's the only real defining factor of what constitutes the separation of like an album and an EP, but that's the only thing I've ever really heard about it. It's just people's opinions on it.
For me, I've heard it not necessarily in terms of numbers of tracks, but I've heard in length of time that is taken up on a disc. For instance, if you have less than 30 minutes of music on an album, generally I've heard it more referred to as an EP. EP actually means extended play, which means it's too long to be a single generally being either one track or two tracks or a track and a karaoke, or but it's not long enough to really be considered a feature full-length album. So there's gonna be variations, and a lot of times you'll find the musician is the one who's defining what they want their thing to be. But when you get into technical terms, generally, an EP is going to be between 3 and 5 tracks, sometimes even 6, depending upon how long some of the tracks are. Whereas an album is going to be, for me, is between 7 and up. 7 and up is, for me, is an actual full length album. And if it extends into 2 discs, then that's just kind of like a soundtrack. And I'm like, yes, lots of music. So
yeah.
What about?
So traditionally, EPs were like called extended plays, and they tended to be it tends to be like a smaller vinyl or one side of a vinyl, so you could only fit on so much content. And I think they tended to run faster. They tended to run at a faster RPM on the vinyl turntable. So yeah, like EPs to me tend to be like 3 to 4 tracks. Albums tend to I tend to measure albums in minutes worth, and that tends to be like 40. I would hope for a decent length album to be like 40 to 60 minutes. But like some pop albums come in at like 35. So yeah, like. But I also, for me, good albums they have more planning going into them in terms of the type of content that makes it. And it's not typically, like a good EP does not make the start of a good album. In that, I think EPs are a good way to showcase your musicality, and sort of they can either hit this broad range of styles and skills that you may have to showcase that, or you could use an EP to like really hone in well on a very short form idea. But then an album, I think, has to have more forethought going into it to make a really good album and not just a collection of songs. Like you can release a collection of songs, and that's fine. And depending on your definition of an album, or the basic track number of tracks or play length, would say it's an album. But does it make it a good album? And I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot more that goes into making a good album than it does making a good EP. So that's all my thoughts on it.
One thing you and I had discussed, Garrick, was flow. In terms of when you listen to an album, I think a lot of people, and not just me, you have an album that you own, and you plug it in, and you maybe only listen to a handful of tracks on that album. Like maybe you love this musician, but this particular album you really are about 2 or 3 tracks on the album, and it has 10 or 15 songs on it. And I think that can cause issue later on down the line, because we had also talked about the differences between when a musician releases their first album versus their second album, and how the flow can be a little bit different, because you're sometimes, if you're making your first album, you've been working on this first album for 5 years, and you have got, as you said, you get a collection of your very best and you put it on your first album. Whereas the second album will sometimes have taken less time, and you haven't really had time to make a whole bunch of really, 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 really good stuff. You just it's like whatever your workflow was, that's what goes on the album. And I think EPs, with some exceptions, can almost be even more so like the first album concept, in that sometimes a musician will choose to release an EP that's just the best of what they've done that year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or the best of what they've done for the past 2 years. It's like, well, I'm not comfortable adding everything I've made because I don't necessarily like everything I made, but how about I just make a smaller little EP of my favorite of what I've made recently, and that way I'll feel like I'm not only presenting my best, but people are more likely to purchase it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think an EP can have less focus than I should make it very clear that I'm not talking about just an album being like in terms of numbers of tracks or play length. Like when I'm saying an album should be, I mean a good album, or like something that I would say, or that you could say would be a great album, sort of, for anyone that liked that style of music. So like, I think flow's very important in an album, but I think like you can define an album with a few different things, and they don't necessarily have to be. It's very difficult to describe. So the easiest one to sort of get across it is this idea of a concept album, which takes an idea or a set of ideas or a story and is entirely focused around that story. Like a lot of prog rock albums, in fact nearly all prog rock albums by just virtue of the genre, are concept albums. They take a story or they take an idea and they solely write around that. And normally it's in like this narrative structure that takes you from the start to the end of the story.
Yeah.
But like you can also make good albums based on the tone or the feeling or of the music. So there's a really good album by a band called Alexis on Fire called Crisis. And the entire the songs are completely separate from each other, but the entire tone is like this really kind of oppressive and very dark style of like post-hardcore, but it's got this like consistent style and tone all the way across it. And that album is great because it's so consistent in that fact. It doesn't need the narrative. It holds together cohesively by using the tone and sort of the feeling of the overall album. But then you've got someone like Panic at the Disco that writes very varied styles of music.
I love Panic at the Disco.
Yeah, like great. I mean, it's Brendan Urie now, pretty much.
Yeah.
But like, so if you take it from like start to take the last 2 or 3 albums, they've all had. You can tell they're all Panic at the Disco albums, but each album has had its own sound.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
Yeah, that's it. And it's that abstract idea of like, you can tell this song is not from this album because it doesn't sound like that album. Right? It sounds like the artist, but it doesn't sound like that album.
Yeah.
So I think you can cohesively like hang an album together that way as well. Close to the Edge is a great album.
And somebody mentioned Porter Robinson's Worlds as a concept album.
Yeah. And you tend to find like these albums hang together very well. And they're not just a random assortment of songs that I've written. you know, they are this cohesive piece of musical literature that has been gathered and organized. So yeah, that's a few of my hot takes on how albums work. But like, yeah, I think thinking about how an album hangs together is very important.
Yeah.
It's not just a collection of songs.
Yeah, it's
one thing I wanted to bring up. One
Hmm.
thing I wanted to bring up, and I think we can all kind of talk about this, Cian, you and me especially, is is the okay. Let's say that I know that there's already a number of people in joining us for today's podcast who are already established musicians in their own right, and if how do they know, or when do they decide that they want to do an album, or that it's time to do an album or something? And this is a question I get asked. I've gotten asked this like twice. It's like, hey, I am a musician and I want to make an album. How do I do that? And when it boils down to it, a lot of times they ask me like the technical aspects, like, you know, I want to just, how do I distribute it on iTunes, or how do I do this? But the big thing is that the question, how do I make an album? Is such an interesting question to me, because I normally reply to, well, are you a musician? Yes. Do you already have music out there? Yes. Do you have a collection of songs that you would really like to put together in a comprehensible or comprehensive way? And they say yes, and I'm like, there's your album. It's so much of in my opinion, so much of the aspects of doing an album is simply sitting down and being like, wow, look at all this music that I'm really proud of, that, you know, I have like 7 tracks here. It's like, I could make an album of this. And once you hit that realization, the rest is more just to me, the technical aspects of, do these songs go together? Yes. Do I have the ability to distribute it? Not yet, but I can find out how. And then what are your two's opinions on that?
Well, I think it's interesting because, okay, my personal experience, I have 1 album out. And I've got some issues with it.
Well, if you don't want to talk about the issues, I mean more just
no, that's
like...
okay. It's just, I think it's important because it's kind of pushing me in the direction that I'm going in now. And I have a lot of issues with the album, to the point where I'm working to re-release it specifically to have more of an impact, like with availability. I didn't have that availability. And I really didn't want to, I mean, okay, I don't know how to put this, but it's like, yeah, of course I want to make an album and I want to make something to sell, but at the same time, do I really want to do that? Because there's all of this work, and you just have to be in this certain place to be able to concentrate on that. Like this past album that I made took, you know, it was my entire music career all put into 1 album. And I am so dissatisfied with everything that it came out with, that, you know, I think about how I only knew it was done because the deadline came up, like referencing something I said the last podcast. But in this, it just feels like if the people who wanted me to make the album had never approached me, I don't think I would have made it. And the only reason I'm working on this like revamped version is because they came to me and pushed me to make this album. And well, they didn't really push me. It's more that I accepted it. And this is me to redo it, to kind of start over in a way.
Right.
And so it's hard to come to terms with this. I don't know. I think it's a very, you know, making an album is a very personal, intimate kind of a thing. At least with my music, I don't know if you feel this way, but it's like all of my music are from different. My songs are from different parts of my life. They represent different things, and they're all very heavy in their meaning, and they're very serious songs that I typically tend to write. I mean, I have tons of things I could put on an album. I wrote a whole song about a smushed up Clementine on a New York City subway. And I could put that on an album, but should I? It's just, there's so much to go off of and so many decisions and choices that it's just overwhelming, it feels like. I guess.
I was just gonna. Oh no, go ahead, Garrett. Go ahead.
No, so I'm in the process of rewriting. I started writing an album that was. I have no plans of major release for it, to be quite honest. It's very much a personal project. This is an album that's kind of outside my wheelhouse in technical ability, but it's something that I really want to write. And a lot of the songs I wrote maybe over 12 months ago now. I'm coming back to it. I'm looking at the songs I've written, and I don't feel like they've done the subject justice. Sorry, I'm just making sure the stream's still live. I don't feel like they've done the subjects justice, or at least I feel like they've tackled the topics in a very crude way. So what I'm doing is the entire album's based on this story that I've essentially created. I'm not going to go into the details because I might want to release it at some point.
Yeah.
But previously I was like, here, I know what my tracks are. I know how I want them to hang together. I know what the topics are, so I wrote them. And I was like, this doesn't actually. It doesn't make sense in this chronological flow. So I've gone back and I'm in the process of rewriting the story, but I'm actually writing it out in prose. So I have essentially a short novel to work off of. And in that prose, sort of I'm breaking everything up track by track. And there's descriptions, and there's the actions of the characters and everything else that's going through. So that was this level of dissatisfaction I had with my own writing for just a personal project. To put together an album, certainly for people who are just hobbyists and make music for fun. They're not trying to earn a living, they're not really fussed about making money or anything. An album is a very difficult process. But if you feel like you do it justice, then it's very rewarding. And I think every person, every musician should try and write a full cohesive album that they've put a lot of thought into how the flow hangs together, how the sounds interact, whether it's consistent across the board in the tone and the instrumentation and everything else. I think it's a really interesting lesson to learn. And a lot of people sort of get hooked on it because they go, right, I did that, these are the problems, next album, and I improve. It's no longer just this track by track improvement, it's an album by album improvement.
Baggage Lizard just said something that's very applicable. They say use Vocaloid, which is optional. Use Vocaloid, post something, get feedback, take feedback into account, improve, practice, repeat. And I'm like, that is absolutely it. And to me, an album, more so than just your music in general, an album is very much like you've created a really great piece of art. something that at the time you're like, yes, this is a good piece of art. But then you come back to it later when you have improved as an artist and, you know, and you see it and you're like, oh God, what was I thinking? The proportions are out of control and the coloring is, and then like so many artists do now, which is very, very popular, is you you redraw it and you show people, hey guys, look, I like here's this image that I did before and here's an improved version. And a lot of musicians will go back to previously released material and improve it or rewrite it or do something. And it's always fun when they do that, because you know, sometimes those songs will have entire fan bases, or have, you know, a lot of people who found that musician because of that song, and then when they re-release it or revamp it or something and either put it on a new album or release it separately, people will appreciate that, because it shows that not only does the artist have respect for their previous work, and they're not like because some artists will completely and totally despise anything that they made in the past. They only want to focus on the present. But it shows that, you know, they're willing to concede, hey, this needed work, and now that I have better skills, I can make the this piece of artwork even better.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, someone's just mentioned in chat that I'm very quiet. I don't know if that's any better, quite frankly. As someone said, I'm stuck on my laptop. We've already binned one entire workstation trying to make this work, so I do apologize. Like, I will try my best to be as loud as possible. So yeah. Yeah, no, I saw some good discussion going on in the chat just now. A lot about rinse, repeat, ask for feedback. I think a good way of like getting in the process of understanding or thinking like you understand how a good album hangs together is like go and find albums that either are critically acclaimed and not just like this album has 2 songs on it that are absolute bangers. Like the whole album is consistently well like received. Go and get those, and then listen to them with a really critical ear, and it should almost be like homework. Because that's the only way, like, you have to process the music on a higher level than just listening to it. And that way you'll start drawing links between, oh, this is why it works, or like sort of, I understand this is now why this is placed here. This track is placed here because of this. Listening to it in a really active way can really help. It's a really good way to drive all of your musical learning, not just like albums in general, but like just listening to a track and being really switched on as to everything that's going on in there. It's a really good way of just improving your musicianship.
Absolutely.
In general.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think with EPs, just to bring it back to the sort of comparisons, EPs can be a bit more scattergun, I think, and it still come off like pretty solid. I think because you're more confined to like 4 tracks, 5 tracks, people know that they're picking up like as long as the tracks aren't like 20 minutes each in like this epic prog saga. Like if it's just like 4 normal tracks, then I think people are like very well conditioned to being like, okay, it's going to be like their best song's going to be first, the last song's going to be a quiet one, the 2 in the middle are going to be 2 solid songs that they've had really well produced. And it doesn't really have to hang together apart from like you can understand it's the same band or the same artist. But yeah, I mean, if do you guys have any other thoughts? Because like I was going to talk about sort of developing concepts for albums, but if like
Oh,
if
you cut out there for a Garrett.
Yeah,
for a
you've been
second,
cutting
Garrett.
out a little bit.
I've been cutting out a bit. Let me just change my.
Yeah. Yeah, you're cutting out more.
How's that?
That
should be better.
There we go.
Yeah, if you guys want to talk about like idea generation or anything, like, because oh yeah, one of the things we were discussing was difficult second albums.
Yeah.
And it's like this running trend, I think, with a lot of musicians. Aki touched on it earlier. In like in a traditional band or something, you could be working towards your first album for like 5 years. And then you go into you get a break, you go into the studio and you record the best songs you have, and you hang them together in a way that makes sense. Or you do your best to do that. Assuming you're not going in with like this vision of a completed album that has a narrative and everything. But then tends to be that you enter a touring cycle and you're on the road for a long time, and so it's whatever you kind of write on the road, and then in 12-18 months time you're expected to record another album, as per your contract most likely. So instead of like the 5 years you've had to prep, you've had 2 maximum. It tends to be why a lot of second albums can be ropey. Occasionally you'll come across a band that has either loads of content that is A-class, or they're just really good at writing songs that they know how to write on the road and everything else. It is possible to have a really good second album, but that tends to be why some artists' second albums can be a bit lackluster. I always find that quite interesting. I always wonder whether having some sort of cohesive vision for an album helps or hinders that, rather than just be like writing songs and then making it like whether having a narrative for the album versus basing an album around tone, whether that is helped or hindered. It's always been an interesting thought of mine.
It's kind of like reading a book. Sorry,
Yeah. No, I was going to agree. It's sort of like doing that. For me, whenever I've released what I consider a major album, or even a lot of my EPs, I choose a central theme, or I go off of one particular song. For instance, the last album I released, the last full-length album I released, is called Connection. And the reason it's called Connection is because all the songs in it deal with connections between two or more people, and it doesn't have to be like a romantic connection. It's just that each song deals with a connection in some way, whether it be severing that connection, starting a new connection, continuing a connection. And Three Hearts is an EP I did. Three Hearts is actually a narrative story. I have another song called A Certain Path, and that one is about starting a certain path. Each song is about going down a different path. And I'm not saying that, each album I listen to or every album that somebody does should choose a theme that entire album is about. But,
structure is nice.
Structure is nice, and again, it can help with the flow.
Structure's
especially
really important. It's what I've been talking about, guys.
I know structure is important, but what I'm saying is that not each song has to have the same narrative. You, as the author, will find which points of interest are in each song if you want to make them have a flow. Yeah,
I think that's fair. Like songs can be linked in idea, so like writing about just connections people have and how different connections play out, you could argue is like just a full concept in itself, and the songs don't have to relate to each other apart from the fact that they share that concept in common. It's like I'm pretty sure it's Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd.
Oh yeah.
Like that album doesn't have, or if it does, it's a really loose one. It doesn't really have like this overarching story. But all of the songs are linked in the topics are essentially topics that could drive a man mad. Like time and money are two like of the big ones. Like people go mad chasing money or feeling like they're running out of time or just feeling the seconds go by, and they write this whole album with no sort of narrative in mind, but they're basing it on these subjects that they know cause like huge amounts of stress in the human mind. So yeah, they don't have to like interlink, but they have this connection all the way through. And Pink Floyd is also amazing, so that helps. Like, it's an amazing album. Like I would not hear otherwise. But I think like Another Brick in the Wall, to go for another Pink Floyd album, is different in that it has a story behind it. You know, it has a narrative structure. So that's sort of a demonstration of how you can do sort of both. Yeah. Go.
Do we maybe want to wrap up this topic by maybe mentioning either an album that we've listened to that we really like, or a favorite album, and then maybe answer some questions?
I could go through like a few of each topic, I think, or of each kind, I think, yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll do some Q&A stuff, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tian, do you want to go? Put you on the spot straight away?
Nope. Absolutely not.
Okay, right, okay. So here's a band that like does like narrative structured albums, I think, really well. It's a band called Between the Buried and Me, and like it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea because it's like prog metal.
Okay.
But the album that I got into them with is called Coma Ecliptic, and it's the story of a guy who he's sort of tired. He's tired of his life. Essentially, there's nothing left in the world that like stimulates him at all. The sort of world that he lives in has this thing where you can medically induce a coma and relive past lives. So he does that to himself, and the album is just him going through these lives and inhabiting these worlds and living in them, and making the decision to move on to the next in sort of search of the perfect world for him. And that's like a really cool narrative structure. They've just released another which is sort of along the same lines, but it's a story of a world where part of the population permanently sleeps, and their dreams are piped out to like TV to be viewed by the people that are awake as like sort of Truman Show style TV shows.
Yeah.
And it's all about the story of a man that escapes, sort of wakes up and escapes, but ultimately decides to go back. And the whole like thing explores a lot of the mental process behind that and the reasons why you'd go back. You've just woken up into the real world, and like, so yeah, those are like two really cool albums that I would recommend. As we said, like I think bands like Alexis on Fire does like tone across an album. That's a cool concept, yeah. Alexis on Fire do like tone across an album really well. They have a really cool sound that's like can be very oppressive. I mean, I could just talk about bands I like for like 2 hours just on my own. Yeah, like and then there's like there's a group duo called the Civil Wars that no longer play, but you could tell it was a Civil Wars album because of the instrumentation and the style, and they wrote, none of the songs really related to each other, but they were all sort of so instrumentally grounded in one another. All the production was super simple. It was a couple of guitars and just two vocalists. They just kept in genre and style really tight, and it was a really tightly produced couple of albums. As chat said, dreams can be good concepts, and
absolutely.
If you're ever stuck for concepts, start out with something like Dream Worlds, because you can just let your imagination run wild. It's a really easy way to get started in writing if you want to do like a narrative style. Yeah. Sian or Aki, do you want to talk about some favorite albums?
Do you want me to go, Sian, or do you have one?
Well, I mean, go ahead. Don't worry. Yeah.
I have one album in particular that I searched for probably about 3 years before I found it, and it's called Crosslight, and it's a collaboration between Livetune and the guy who designed Gumi. I searched for it for 3 years before I finally found a copy of it. And I had heard it. I had heard the full album before I ever got a copy of it. But the entire album is a concept album. And it's one of the reasons I want to get it is because it's the only instance in which that particular producer has ever used Gumi. I still think to this day he tends to use Miku. But also because the actual promotional video for the album, I was just like this the whole time, like, what is this story? And to this day, I still cannot tell you exactly what it's about. It's because it's all in, because I can only read so much Japanese. And as we all know, those of us who read Japanese, kanji is our #1 enemy. And so I can only get a fragment about what this album is actually about, even with the full illustrations. But essentially the story is about, I think this is what it's about. I think it's about a little girl android who is possibly based off the daughter of a scientist, maybe. And she's in a very Chobits fashion. She's found by a little boy, and then he like takes her around and is trying to teach her how to be a person. And then one day they're in a shopping center, and the little girl hears Gumi singing. Gumi in this story is just a pop idol, and something in Gumi's voice triggers the little robot girl, and I think she starts getting flashbacks or something, but like it turns out like her hair can move up and she has elf ears. And then at the end she meets Gumi on stage and they sing a song together. And that's all I can tell you that this album is about, I think. And I don't know, it's just really intriguing. And also the fact that this particular album features Gumi and Miku, and it's obviously trying to tell a story. And I don't know, I just really, really like it. To this day, it's fantastic.
Didn't you send me an album that was I can't remember who the female protagonist was, but it was a love story between Ronald McDonald and...
Yes. That is a series. It's not, I have 2 of the album, but not all of the songs are on the album. It's actually a very long series. It took up, I think, maybe 5 years of this guy's life of writing music. So
I'm still haunted by the artwork to this day.
I have never heard of this, but I would like to be informed.
Oh, it's great. Drop it in the Discord, Aki. We'll watch it later. Because it traumatized me, Sian. It traumatized me. The artwork alone was like...
Yeah, the author is called Putin P, if that gives you any indication.
Oh!
Putin
Okay.
P, and for those of you who are Vocaloid fans, you will know that Putin P did a song called "The Eyes That Vanish," and it was that song in particular is his most famous one because it had a really nice PV that went with it. But the story is like that Miku is engaged to Ronald McDonald. Rin and Len are Vocaloids. Rin is the reincarnation of a child assassin who used to work in Russia for Putin. And she was called the Machine Gun of something. I don't remember. And then she died and was reincarnated, and also Ren is reincarnated. He was once Rin's dog when she was human, and now they're in love with each other. And Gakupo's in it, and I think Gakupo is the reincarnation of somebody. I don't know. It goes. It's really complicated. But if you guys ever get a chance, please listen to the Putin P series. It is like a lot of songs and a lot of content, but it will take you on an existential journey.
That was like fanfic on crack. Like that is outrageous, that story. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
That's perfect.
There's like this entire page on the Vocaloid wiki about this, and there's like a whole section that's like, why is Miku dating Ronald McDonald? And I'm like, all right.
Why not?
Why not?
I'll put that in the chat because this is one interesting link. There we go. Put it in the chat for the stream, and here's
if you want to learn more about Putin P, follow that link and listen to some of the music. The music is fantastic, but it will take you on a journey.
I'll keep that in mind.
Any albums you rate, Sia?
So, on the topic of concept albums, what if I went a little further and decided to talk about concept musicians? Like the Gorillaz and Femme, which are Far East mentioned mannequins, where they're like these two girls from Japan, and they basically pretend to be mannequins in all of their songs, and like their entire career is like music career is based off the fact that they're mannequins. And then you've got people like what do you call it, Studio Killers with Cherry, who's this animated lead singer, and it's like concept people. Now that, I mean, the Gorillaz has a lore that's been going on for God knows how long, since their creation. And so it's just like
I watched a video sort of stitching together all of like the story of the Gorillaz. It's such an involved backstory. It's fascinating. I guess like in a less sort of straight up way, you could probably drop Daft Punk in that category. Because sort of the whole shtick for them is that they are the robots. But I guess they're not quite as diehard on it. Yeah, Ace from Powerpuff Girls was the biggest Gorillaz twist. It absolutely was.
That was really funny.
Yeah, no, I think there's a group called like Steampunk Giraffe or something.
Oh, Steam Powered Giraffe. I love
Giraffe.
them.
Yeah, like I'm aware of them. I don't really get their music. But like it can't be to everyone's taste. But yeah, like I know some people who are really into them. And it's just like it adds this level of experience to, I guess, all their live stuff. Like this whole grandeur that it will never feel like corporate. Just here's the latest lighting rig, and here's the latest like podium that raises and drops. You know. The shows tend to feel like a more thought out and well designed event, and it adds another level of experience to it. Yeah, shall we do some Q&A? I saw there were some really good questions in the Twitter. Remember to use hashtag ZG Podcast. to send us questions, because God knows I'm not following the chat. I'm doing everything I can to keep my laptop alive right now, and the chat tends to burn it out. Hey, I would like to try out music production, but with almost zero knowledge, I would like to ask this. Is it possible to teach yourself about the ins and outs of music production? I'm aware that it'll take a very long time, but I appreciate your input, ZG Podcast. And that's from Umbra, or at the Umbra the Fox. Absolutely. Even with your limited knowledge, even if you are a dummy, you can teach yourself music production. The road can be rough, and you will feel like you're not getting better for a long time. Or at least the eternal curse is that you'll think you've done well, and then you'll come back 6 months later, and whatever you've done will be hot garbo.
It'll be offensive
in your eyes, yeah. It like, music production can be rough. It's like eternal tweaking. You're always learning, and there's always like something else shiny on the market that will promise to solve every problem that you have, and some of them do, some of them don't. Music production is like a really long, like I would say all of us probably have a pretty solid hand in production now. And in no way could we hold a candle to some of the producers, mixing artists, recording engineers out there.
Speak for yourself. I'm the best musician that has ever allowed. I'm not. I'm really not. Cian, you're almost entirely self-taught, aren't you? If not all self-taught?
Yeah, I can't read notes. I can't do anything. I'm self-taught, yes. So
I mean,
but you're awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, your production's really solid though.
Oh, so, thank you. That's the nicest thing ever. I really appreciate that. I don't know. It's just kind of like, I didn't write a song with a pitch shift until like 5 years into my career. I didn't write a song that I had an actual structured chorus until about a year into my music career. You know, it's just, you gotta just kind of take it a little bit at a time and set a goal for yourself. That's what I think you should try doing. Because if you can get to that point where you're just like, you don't have to really second guess what's missing, then you can start to rearrange things, which is what I'm trying to do. Because I noticed with two of my songs, actually called Biohazard and Breaking Point, that if you put the vocals over each other's instrumentals, the structure of the song is exactly the same. And it is so funny because there are different parts in the structure. There are different parts for like the instrumental break and everything, but it's still plays out perfectly. And I was so ashamed.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, though. I think that's with a lot of musician stuff, because there's a lot of musicians I can name off the top of my head where I have made perfect mashups of their music, of their own songs, just by listening to it in the car. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you know, you have a style and you like it, and that's what you like to compose. And that's another thing, like when you do get into music composition, if that does bother you though, there are certain things you can do by like focusing on one particular aspect of your music at any which time until you get to a level where you're happy with it. Like, for instance, I want to work on vocal melodies. So then from then on, when you're working, you work with improving your vocal melody. I want to work on improving my drums, and then you focus on it. And that's a really good way to get yourself to a level that you're happy with.
Yeah. In terms of like musical structure, I wouldn't feel bad, as Billy Talent have made an absolute killing off of copy and pasting this. I love the band, but my god, I could cookie cutter their songs in terms of like structure. It's really funny. As soon as one of my friends pointed it out to me, I could never unhear it. And it's just like, they open with this dope guitar riff, and then they'll do that guitar riff, only slightly heavier, and then it'll all drop out and they'll do a verse, and then they do that guitar riff again, and then they do another verse, and then they do a chorus, and then they do that guitar riff again. It's always the same. And like, as soon as I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as the songs are catchy and the lyrics are good and you've got a good hook, like, make music. Like, doesn't matter. But in terms of, like, going back to the original question, knowing nothing, can I make, like, should I try and teach myself music production? Yes. There are loads of really, really good learning resources online. One of them is a channel called Pensado's Place. These are like the two channels that really helped me out. One's called Pensado's Place. It's run by a guy called Dave Pensado, who's a mixing engineer, and he's won so many awards. Like, so many awards. But he's really good, and he just like does this YouTube channel to help, you know, aspiring mixing engineers. And he'll take you through how he treats songs in terms of like how I got this bass to sit like this, or how I treat my vocals in this way. And then there's another one called Recording Revolution, which is like a very homegrown, do it in your home studio, make professional sounding albums, run by a guy called Graham, and it's an absolutely great resource. And then just like learning what everything does, and you can do a lot of it by ear. You can learn what a compressor does, each knob, just by playing with each one over and over and learning what it does to the sound. I would not be ashamed to say that I'm not really sure what the knee control on a compressor really does. I've been mixing music for how many years? Like, I literally went to school for this, and yeah, I'm not really sure what a knee control does still, but like, I use it when I need to and when I feel like it does something to the sound that it needs. So you can do a lot of work by ear. And yeah, like Pensado's Place, Recording Revolution. There's a Mix with the Masters, Pro Tools Expert, I think it's called. There's loads of online resources. A lot of them are YouTube based. A lot of them have blogs. So yeah, check those guys out. They're really helpful, and they're really good for new people coming into music production. Have you guys seen anything interesting? Like,
well, I see a specific 0G question.
Yeah.
Somebody asking about. I'm assuming this is one of 0G's sample things, but they want to know if NY Cuts 1 will ever return, or is there a bundle they're missing because they're a big fan of Cuts 2.
NY Cuts 1, I don't think is coming back. I might have an original CD kicking around that's part of our official library that obviously I can't give out or sell. The answer is I don't think it'll ever come back on the market. Yeah, sorry about that. That's one of our really legacy products as well. Yeah, I don't think it'll come back. Sorry.
I see a question by Baggage Lizard. What's the most famous piece of music you've definitely heard 0G content in?
Oh man, I get asked to identify samples all the time. And I don't think people realise just how many samples 0G has.
Yeah.
Can you pick out this one loop? No is the answer. That tends to be a very polite email back saying, no, I can't.
No. For me, the only answer I have is Porter Robinson's "Sad Machine" with the Vocaloid of Anna in it. That's the only one I know definitely that's a 0G product. And it's
Penny and Stocking with Garter Belt.
Is that a
anime has samples from in the soundtrack from 0G products.
it really?
Yes.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
can name them. Some of them.
Do it.
Oh my god,
Pop
no!
quiz.
Not right now.
Pop quiz.
Later. It uses one that has... There's like 2 songs, like Teddy Lloyd uses them, and I love it because I was remixing one of the songs, and then I just went and I bought the thing, and it's gone now, and I don't... rip. But but he uses like the vocal packs.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then,
yeah.
Yeah, I get sent emails a lot. A lot of them have like game music in them. So I know Zero G like Zero G samples make it to like game music a lot. I've been asked about some
to an anime.
Yeah, and I know that we've been contacted by a couple of people that make like music library content.
Really?
Yeah, what's the production music? That's what it's officially called. The kind of stuff that it's sort of like royalty free, only you pay for it. Like companies like Extreme Music from London. They essentially go, right, we've got X thousand libraries of music, all of them catered for slightly different things. They tend to be more like TV and movie related. But sometimes the deadlines for those are like super short, so it'd be like, make me 10 tracks of like cyberpunk music and you have 7 days to do it. At which point I know some people like will use loops and samples to do it.
I remembered one.
Huh.
The movie Paprika by legendary animation filmmaker Satoshi Kon, who has sadly left us. And by left us, I don't mean he left; he has passed away. Lola, of course, the main theme and popping out throughout that entire soundtrack is Lola's voice bank for the song "Girl in the White Tiger Field," as well as number other of samples. I think either featuring Lola or maybe Zero G voice banks. Composed by Susumu Hirasawa, one of my favorite composers.
Oh, he's my favorite too. So I think that was also the first commercial use of a Vocaloid product in media as well.
I think that is I think it happened right around that time, or at least that's the first one in like a major film.
Yeah,
or it's either the first major Vocaloid commercial release. Or it's the first one used in film, or both.
I think it's both. I know there was an album that was using only Leon, and it was... I don't know. That was a really weird album.
A long time ago.
Yeah, but that was like a person's little indie album. But in terms of like whole ass professional release, I think that was the first of its kind. So Zero G gets to like claim a lot of bragging rights when it comes to their products. Yeah,
we get around. Just do some real quick fire questions from the chat. My Chemical Romance did with an album-wide narrative for their last 2 albums. Yes, Danger Days was amazing. I love that album, and it is a full narrative. I want to learn another DAW, but I'm fine using Fruity Loop Studios despite its lack of notation options. Try something like Ableton. Switch over to Ableton and see how you feel about that. Really different workflow, but it starts expanding out into like more traditional DAW setups, and like it will start giving you like notation options as well. So yeah, I think Ableton Live's a good place to start. Or Presonus Studio One Artist is another really good sort of beginner DAW that doesn't cost much. If you want to hear us talk more about DAWs, check out our last podcast where we discussed them at length, actually.
Yeah. There is one good Twitter question.
Go.
It says, what are some of your favorite album covers?
Good question. I've seen some really bad ones recently, which I've hated, and they've all been from bands that I like.
Like what? What happened?
Like the new album artwork for Between the Buried and Me, the Automata. It's just it's just rubbish. It's so bad. Like the Coma Ecliptic album artwork was great, and then Automata was rubbish. I don't know, like album artwork that really grabs me.
I'm thinking there's too many for me to choose, but I do have one in particular.
Go
on. It's the album that I've spent the most money on in my entire life, which is Parallel Worlds or Parallel Worlds by Deco Nina.
Yeah.
It's a very simple album cover in some respects, but on the other hand, it's also kind of very complicated because it has a tiny little female figure in it, in the upper part, and then on the bottom part is a reflection of that same girl in that same world, but everything is just kind of worse in the reflected world. Okay. And it's very like watercolor done, little kind of not quite anime, but just kind of really cute, almost like a children's book illustration. I love it. I love every aspect of it.
Yeah. I think the only one that I can really think of off the top of my head is that one of the Evanescence album with the lead singer, and she's all tinted blue, but her face is kind of like airbrushed, so you can't really see her nose. And then that's when you know shit's about to go down. You're gonna mosh.
You're gonna mosh.
Yeah.
You look like the girl from Ergo Proxy.
Oh my god, she does.
Mm-hmm.
And her voice, for such a tiny woman, she's like, oh my god, she's so good at singing.
Totally.
Yeah. That's how you know it's about to go down.
Yeah, I'm just flicking through my phone right now. And there's some that I find really interesting, but I'm like, is it super great album artwork? There's one by Cohen Sound that I'll never forget, just because it's so bright. The entire thing is so bright. It's off an EP called Funk Blaster, and it's of this massive multicolored funk robot destroying a city. And it blows my mind every time I look at it. It
sounds awesome.
Amazing.
It's beautiful.
That is a great piece of album artwork. Cohen Sounds the Funk Blaster EP. It's pretty great.
I got a personal question in the hashtag, but I will say to Metal Harmony. That question, I believe, is one I answered in the last podcast, and so that I don't keep answering the same question, check in some of the audio later on in the last podcast, because they wanted to know how much did I have to record for Dinah, and I think I do a general answer for that. I can't tell you specifics, but I think I answered that in the last podcast.
Yeah, with stuff like I'll say this so hopefully we don't have to retrack it so often. Don't want to be the party pooper of the podcast, but there's certain stuff we can't talk about in relation to product development, just because it's all very hush hush, and it's a lot of
it's like a mafia.
Yeah. No, it's just when you're developing products, there's a lot of paperwork that gets signed with non-disclosure agreements and stuff like that. So. There's
we'll tell you, but we'll have to kill you.
Yeah, we tell you.
Yes. Yeah, we'll go with that. We'll go with that.
We'll tell you, but you're definitely gonna die immediately after. So that choice is yours, my friend. The secret to eternal youth. Death.
Does CN have that kind of power?
Yeah.
I'm afraid of what power CN has.
Oh boy. Okay.
I'm glad that we're establishing this now.
CN runs this podcast now. Is all.
Yeah.
Okay. Without much more ado, we'll move on. Let's just talk about mixing and stuff.
Yes.
Because we got a good question earlier about mixing and production and stuff, but let's specifically talk about mixing, how you can make your mixes better. I've covered a load of resources online. I'll try and remember to put them in the description at the end or in the chat at the end. But stuff like Recording Revolution, Pensado's Place, Pro Tools Expert. These are a great place to learn specific things. and they'll cover some of the stuff we talk about as well. But yeah, do you guys have any like hot tips or philosophies for mixing? Because I've come across like several in my time, some of them conflicting, some of them not, and it's always tricky to decide which one to be like, yeah, this one works for me, or this is the right one. So yeah, do you guys have any like hot takes? You know, what do you do every time?
I try to make sure there's not too much compression. That's really the one that's my biggest battle when it comes to mixing, is trying to make sure that everything sounds together but not heavily compressed. And so that's all I'm not really big on mixing. I typically I'm so exhausted by the end of a song that I know that if I am the one who mixes it myself, I'm not going to do a very good job. So I tend to reach out and ask for help when it comes to mixing. But if I have to mix something myself, something small like maybe a cover, I just try to not add too much, and always use like high quality instrumentals and stuff. I don't know. Just try to keep it simple. That's what I try to do.
Yeah.
But those are for simpler, smaller projects where I can get away with something like that. For whole songs, like, yeah, no, there's not much advice I can give.
It was definitely a mistake I made when I first started, but I was like, you have to have EQ and compression on everything, even if it's just a little bit. And you soon realize, like, actually how, if you've got like good source material, like good like starting audio, you don't need that many plugins. Like you can just run some channels completely empty, and just have the volume balanced correctly. So like, yeah, I think you're right. And I used to be of like I used to always compress everything just a little bit, just duck the tops. Like, you don't actually need to, as long as it's not like clipping or anything, and the sound level is, you know, within reasonable like highs and lows. There's no need to run like a compressor on it. You can just let it breathe, and sometimes it adds a lot more space to your mix, and you just don't realize it until you stop doing it. Yeah, do you have any like fast and loose tips or stuff you do every time, Aki?
Well, for me, mixing is a constant learning exercise. I started out with Mixcraft, funnily enough, something called Mixcraft, which I think was not necessarily that great for mixing. Let me rephrase that. The mix was fine, was not, and there is a bit of a difference between mastering and mixing. You have to mix in order to be able to master. But yeah, for me, my last album was entirely mixed and mastered by myself, because it was what I called my last hurrah for using a certain DAW. And I like to think I have a general knowledge of how to mix. I'm not necessarily great at it. There's still a lot I want to learn, but I kind of enjoy mixing it myself because it's giving me the opportunity to learn to be a better mixer. Though generally when I'm about to release a final product, I will normally, you know, consult a friend or have somebody who's a bit more knowledgeable mix it, or mix a certain thing that I'm having difficulty doing so, or something like that. Just because when the final product is released, I want it to be the best it can possibly be. But yeah, I like mixing as almost as much as I despise mixing.
Yeah.
Because there's always, for me, in my opinion, there's always going to be something in it that is going to niggle at you. No matter what you do, you're going to listen to it, and it's going to be like a little worm wiggling into your head, and you're going to be like, ugh, there's something there that I don't know what it is, but I don't have the skill to know what it is. But yeah, there are so many different types of mixing, though. Because Cian, you said mixing for covers. That's an entirely different type of mixing.
Yeah.
Like if you're singing a cover, because I think oftentimes you get a song, like a really high quality karaoke or that is already mixed, and so it's like mixception where you're putting a mix on top of a mix.
Yeah, two-track mixing is very different to like multi-track mixing. If you're like starting out in hip hop, and you're doing your own kind of stuff, you learn to two-track mix really quickly, because that tends to be how it, like, you get your instrumental delivered, and then you do you over the top of it, and then somehow you've got to make that voice sit in there naturally with everything else, or not, as most people do, and just like smash it on top really loud.
Yeah.
But for rough mixes, it tends to be all right. Baggage Lizard just commented like mixing can be used as an instrument on its own. It's really true. Like, don't treat. I think the biggest thing I found is like don't treat mixing as. Don't treat it as like part of the process, part of the technical process. Treat it as like a creative process, because you are deciding how your instruments sound. You're deciding how your song sounds, and part of it's like arrangement, and part of it is like deciding what is prominent at what point. In like this, the simplest way is being like the guitar solo. The guitar should be louder than everything else. Yeah, that's really true. But then like, it's making the decision as to why the bass should pop out more in verse 2 and the guitars should take a back seat. You know, it's creating that separation from verse 1, and it's creating that separation from the chorus. It's that kind of idea. So yeah, mixing is very, very much a creative process as well as like this technical one. So yeah, think creatively about your mixing, because it's really important. Because otherwise you just end up with like cookie cutter, bland mixes that don't really do anything interesting. Yeah, take risks. Most of the time it'll be okay. Some of the time it'll be rubbish, and some of the time it'll be great. But you'll never know unless you like do something about it.
If there's one thing I could tell you not to do, though, when mixing, there's very few things, in my opinion, that I would tell you not to do, because I think it's important that you make mistakes, because that teaches you, oh, well, that was a mistake. Now I know how to fix it. But the one thing I would say do not do to start with is, if you can avoid it, do not mix using Audacity.
No.
Yeah.
Audacity...
Everybody and every single person I know has been guilty of.
Yeah.
Audacity, you can record in Audacity. You know, I have no problems with recording, but do not mix it in Audacity. Because Audacity is not a mixing program. And you can get something. Tenchi says, too late, LOL. But you can get something like Reaper, and Reaper does have mixing capabilities, because you can also use it to make music, and it will allow you to make a better mix than Audacity ever could. Nothing wrong with. I'm just trying to cut out one very painful step for you, because everybody I know has once mixed using Audacity.
I'm so guilty.
No. Baggage Lizard, not only can you normalize audio in Audacity, which you can, most importantly, you can make bass boosted memes in Audacity. It's the one and only use.
My very first mashups were in Audacity.
Yeah, Audacity has a horrible like mixing. You can't even call it a mixing now, but like it has a horrible format for it. Get some kind of free DAW. Like, it will save you a lot of pain and a lot of stress as to why you can't get something to work properly. There are alternatives. Treat yourself right. Okay, so diving into something like something a bit more technical. There's this concept I wanted to talk about, which is 80-20, which then ties in with another called top-down mixing. A lot of people do this thing where they group their instruments, get their mixing space laid out as they like it, which you should do every time. Organize your workspace; it's super important. And then they start with like the drums, and then they add the bass, and then they add the guitars. They go along until they've added everything in. And they'll do like one element at a time. And so they'll process their drums all in one. They'll do all the tracks, they'll put their EQs on everything, put their compressions and stuff. And then they'll add the bass. And they'll do all the bass stuff. And then they'll go and tweak the drums. And then they do the guitars. And then they go and tweak the bass and the drums. This concept of 80-20 came from like... I think it originally came from like this make your life happier kind of concept, which is like spend 80%, or it was a work harder concept, like spend 80% of your time doing what affects your mix or your work most, and then spend 20% on the details, which is a really good way of working quickly when you're mixing, and it means you don't overthink things. Also, like testing yourself with just set a timer for 1 hour and do an entire song and mix a song. Honestly, it'll blow your mind how fast you work when you know you've got an hour to do everything. Like, it won't be perfect, but it'll be a really, really good. It's not even like a rough mix. It's a really good mix one. Just setting like an hour's clock and doing it as fast as possible. Because you make a lot of gut decisions. You don't overthink things. And you go on like you do just work with your ears, and you're like, okay, that's too loud, or that's over compressed, or so all that kind of stuff. But spend 80% of your time doing what affects as much of the track as possible, and then spend 20% doing tweaks. If you go over that, then you're overworking your mix. So that's a good way of like keeping yourself kind of on the straight and narrow in terms of like, efficiency. And there's another one called top-down mixing, which I came across and was so intrigued that I just made it my workflow for a while, and I'll still occasionally use it because it's a really good way of doing it. Get all your stuff lined up. Create buses for your drums and your guitars, so they go to one track. So your drums all goes to a stereo track, your guitars go to a stereo track, all your backing vocals go to a stereo track. Group as much as you can together, and then just do processing on those buses. Like affect as much as you can with one plugin, and do as much work as you can with one plugin, just to start with, and then you'll realize you tweak less and less the further you go down the instruments. So like you EQ your stereo bus. You're like, okay, I need a bit more bass in this, and I need a good high shelf that really brings out the top end so it sparkles, and then I'll compress it a bit. And you won't believe how much work that actually does, and you'll find that you use compressors less and less early in the chain because it's already done and you can hear it already being done. So it's a good way of saving CPU as well. Top-down mixing like 80-20 I found was really interesting philosophies for approaching mixing. They really caught my imagination a lot, and they do change the way you approach it in a really significant way.
Yeah. One important thing also is testing your mixes. Because that's a really good way of testing your mixing abilities, like, or not overthinking your mixing. But let's say that you finished your mixes and you want to test those. I have a 5 test system where first my laptop speakers, then I test in my car, then I test on my phone, and then I find a miscellaneous test, and it can either be testing with my friends or testing on a different computer or testing, and basically what I've determined is that when I do that, I end up with a mix that sounds good on every speaker system that I would possibly be listening to it on. And if it sounds good to me on everything, then I know that that mix is up to my standard.
Yeah, testing mixes is. Sorry, we've had some.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Internet problems. Yeah, no, like testing mixes on loads of systems is like this tried and true. It's come out of like studios who will have like 2 or 3 speaker setups.
Yeah.
And they'll just flick them between them so they can make adjustments as per. One of like the best ways to do it is to the classic one is to throw your mix in the car and listen to it critically in there, because it's where most people consume a lot of music.
Yeah.
And your car stereo is not going to be great unless you own like a really top class car, which most people working in the music industry don't. Like unless you own like a super good car, the speakers are going to be like average at sort of best. So hearing how like honky or weird the top end sounds in those speakers, or how horrible the bass is, it's super important. But you don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money on like on studio monitors. It definitely helps, and this is in no way me saying you don't need studio monitors. They make such a difference. They speed up your mixing process so much, and it's the difference between walking through a dark room with sunglasses on and walking through a dark room with a torch. It's that kind of difference. You can still do it, but it's going to take you longer. So yeah, it's like if you can if you can afford the money in getting some kind of monitor system, it definitely helps. It definitely helps your mixes from the get go and makes it all faster.
Totally.
But like just testing on loads of systems definitely helps. It'll mean your mixes come out more consistent in like the long run. Just be prepared to listen to your own music a lot, and for it not to sound very good a lot. Like you very quickly learn how bad music can sound when you drop an awful mix onto an awful system.
Yeah.
And it can be soul crushing, but it's a very important. It's an important lesson to learn. Yeah, but that kind of thing, like, you either learn how to remedy it quicker, or you just don't get that many slip-ups. The more time goes by and the more you learn about it. Like, there are just certain tricks you can pick up on, like, if your guitars sound too muddy or they don't have enough clarity or anything, then the 200 to 500 hertz range with a couple dB scoop out just cleans them up. Same for snare drums. Like if your snare is too, or if your drum kit in general is too boxy, dig out that 200 to 500 region and just sweep around until you find some, the sweet spot, and then take that out. There's loads of tricks that you very quickly learn. And like, you don't have to have golden ears. You don't have to be like, oh, I can identify this frequency and I know it's exactly wrong. A lot of people can't do that. It definitely helps if you can, but like a lot of people can't. So
but the more you mix, the better you will be at finding the problems in your own music.
Oh, definitely. definitely. It's very much like this. It's very much this practice thing. And really, you're only ever learning about mixing when it's going horribly. When it's going well, you're not learning about mixing. So don't count it as practice if it's going well, because you are going through the motions, and hey, you'll have an awesome product and it'll sound great. And don't knock that either. But like, you're not necessarily testing yourself and learning unless everything's falling apart in front of you, which...
And you're curled into a fetal position, rocking back and...
It's just this recurring... I'm getting PTSD from it now. Like, on my first mixes. It's like, how can I sound so bad? Yeah, no, it's... you've just got to keep practicing. As I said, all these online learning resources giving you tips and tricks. Super important.
But the great thing as well, and as we had mentioned earlier, if you do make a mix that you're not happy with later on, you can always revisit. Don't feel that you can't.
Yeah, I'm actually going and remixing a project that I did for some friends about 3-4 years ago now. I'm actually revisiting that just for my own sake and going through and seeing how I can improve it compared to where I was back then. And sometimes you'll find that you can't mix a song well, and like, you'll try everything and it just doesn't work. And sometimes it's the arrangement that's the problem, or it's the recording that's the problem, and sometimes there's just no fixing it. Or you'll do your best to fix it, but it's never going to sound as great as it did if it was arranged or it was recorded properly. So always bear that in mind. Like, mixing is not a magic bullet. If you're ever recording and someone says, we'll fix it in the mix, hurt them, because you won't be able to. It doesn't work like that. Get it right in recording, and you'll find your mixing is so much easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In terms of like, we've hopped on a lot about mixing. Why is it important to actually learn to mix your own music? Well, if you're doing like rough demos and stuff, if you're sending out prospective EPs to people, or if you're like sending your music off to someone else to be properly mixed, and you already have a vision of how you want it to sound. Even doing a rough mix is super important because it gives people this signpost as to where this is meant to be going. So yeah, that's a really good reason to learn how to mix. You guys got any input on that?
I mean, that's really well phrased. That's about...
I think a lot about mixing. I think a lot about mixing.
Well, I actually have a mixing story.
Yeah.
And it was a mixing horror story, and I'm not gonna name any names, but I took part in a project where I wrote, or where they featured a song, and the person decided that my mix wasn't good enough, which is fair enough. I was like, no, that's fine. I realized this thing needs to have a certain sound for this whole album, so I have no problem with mixing it. And then they mixed it, and the final mix I didn't get any feedback on. I didn't get to hear it before it was released. And then I finally got the project, and I'm like, okay, let's see how it hears. And then I listened to the mix, and I thought the mix was awful. And I was just kind of like, because this person, you know, I thought that this person was a much better mixer than they ended up being, to the point that there's a click in the song that they didn't remove. And when I heard it, because I knew that click could sometimes get there if you didn't do a certain thing with the mix, and I knew what I needed to do in order to fix that. And when I played it back, for one, the mix was just, it was too high. For one, the pass on it was way too high, and then it got to that point and it clicked, and I was like, I can't even listen to my own song on this album.
Yeah. And
it was just so bad, and I was so upset because you know, one thing you gotta be sure of is that if you are working with somebody who's mixing your stuff, that you're with them every step of the way, that you're like, hey, you just finished this mix. I need to listen to it before you do anything else with it. And then you listen, and then you give your feedback, and that if there's something that they need to fix, then you let them know they need to fix it. Because in the end, it is your music. And that mix not only has to be up to their standards, it has to be up to your standards too, because it's your music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's true. It. It's kind of hard sometimes to be like, this is not what I was looking for. And, you know, working and severing things on projects and like, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah,
it is. Like mixing is a lot of pressure. Most of the time, if you're doing it for someone else, someone's entrusting you with their like creative output, like their baby, and you have to treat it sensitively, because you know they want to hear the best that it can be, and they're entrusting you to do that. And when you're mixing your own stuff, you already want it to be the best it can be. So you know that puts pressure on yourself. Mixing is a super important step, and like I think we'll try at some point. We'll break down. I think we'll try and work out a way to do some live like song sharing and door sharing. We'll show you how we maybe treat drums or something at one point, or how to treat.
I would like that.
Yeah, we'll see if we can work out a way to do like remote hosted projects. So we can invite you to do some music with us at some point. That'll be fun. Right, we're going to go into some Q's and A's now. I'm just going to step away for a second because I need some more water. But yeah, like guys, use the hashtag ZG Podcast. I just saw a really interesting question which I don't want to miss. It's how do you mix screamo? I'll answer that when I come back. So
oh Lord, if I know how, jeez.
But that's an interesting one for you.
Yeah.
I do have answers for this, and you're not going to like them. I'm just going to step away for a second. Guys, use the hashtag, use chat, send us some questions. I'll be back in a moment.
Because we like questions. They're good for us. And
I have a good question.
What's your question?
What's your favorite color?
Of sound?
Yeah.
Because you could paint with all the colors of the wind. I like what I would call, because that's an interesting thing though to say, because I do think music very much is like colors. It makes you think of colors. I once was reading an article somebody wrote about where they were teaching somebody who was blind but had perfect hearing how to sense colors through music. And gosh, I wish I could find the article. I should have saved it. But like they would play them like jazz or really soft piano music to represent blue. And then like for red they were like screamo.
Oh my god.
And yellow was like, I don't really remember what yellow was yellow might have been orchestral. I don't know. They did a rundown of what each one that they played them, and that by the end of it that person was like, oh, so it's like sad, or oh, so it's like aggressive or anger. And it's like, yeah, that's what I mean, that's how we see it. And I thought that was really interesting because, you know, some people are, when it comes to color, you know, and people are describing color, you could say, oh, well, blue is like cold and hot. It's like, well, can't something that's hot also be blue? And it's like, yeah, but if you use music to describe color, I don't know, because music can connect to you emotionally. And I just thought that was a really interesting article. Music and color.
Is so like complicated. Wow.
I know, right?
Have you come across a thing called synesthesia?
Yes.
Yeah. So synesthesia is attaching colors to things that don't have colors. One of my musician friends doesn't have musical synesthesia, but he has a synesthesia where he associates colors to like random things like weekdays. So like I think I asked him once like, Wednesday is orange for some reason, and it's not because of Orange Wednesdays. It's just it's orange. So like yeah, like synesthesia is a really, really interesting subject, and
Yeah.
I'd really like to look more into it before we like talk in depth about it, because I think it's fascinating.
Oh yeah. Oh, we got a really quick question because this one is we could answer quickly. Klumali would like to know, as we go to concerts, are there any reusable earplugs, brands, or anything that we would recommend to them for the Miku Expo show?
Go deaf. No, I used to borrow earplugs from my old workplace because we had. I used to work in a scuba diving shop, so we had an air compressor going a lot, which was super loud. So like we had earplugs that we could wear, but they were disposable. If you're gonna buy like reusable ones, I think I've heard a lot of my musician friends. They basically go like, just go and get some molded ones, and that way they'll never be uncomfortable, and you can wear them as long as you need. I know that you can get ones that let like certain frequencies through and then dampen other frequencies, so it's not just like the whole bandwidth. But it depends on how much like you want to spend.
I've just gotten some from Walmart.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever taken earplugs to a concert, which is really bad because I go to a lot of rock gigs.
I haven't either, never. But
Yeah.
I just get Walmart ones when I do. I get them for fireworks.
Yeah, like, to be honest, like disposable ones, yeah, disposable ones are good. To be honest, they'll do the job for the few hours you've got to wear them. Reusable ones, you do run into the risk of like giving yourself ear infections and stuff, which isn't good, obviously. Yeah, I don't really have a solid answer for you. It depends on where you are in the world as well. Like, there'll be US brands that you can't get in the UK and vice versa. So, yeah, I do some research. There'll be some forums, like KVR forums maybe. Gear Sluts will have answers. But yeah, like, tends to be like disposable ones are a good way to go. Yeah, so, right, I'm going to really quickly answer this question. What part of writing a song do you each think is the most fun? We'll answer that in a second.
The chorus.
The chorus is a good.
The chorus. It's fun.
The chorus.
That's where all the hooks come in. This is the chorus. That's when you make something that's addictive that you want to listen to. The chorus, always. It's the most powerful part because it puts in. It leaves the last impression, like it's usually songs wrap up with a chorus sometimes, and that can leave your final impression on a song. It's one of the first impressions on a song too, because it's like I can forgive a crummy verse if the chorus is like jamming, you know? Like you can be crap if the chorus is something I'm going to rock out to.
You know what? Weirdly enough, like the part I like writing most in a song tends to be like the post-chorus. Weirdly enough. So okay, my the reason for this, it makes sense. Most of the time the post-chorus is where it's like it's the hardest hitting point where you'll drop in a proper groove. And I really like writing grooves. Like if I write something, I'm just like, oh man, I could hear that going all day, and it's got this bounce or this drive to it. That's my favorite part of any song. I don't care where it is, as long as it's got this really cool groove or like rhythmic passage, I'm in. And most of the time I find it in like the post-chorus, pre-verse kind of area. Yeah, that's my part. Or like I really like intros where you're just like drums and bass, and like again it's the groove thing for me. So yeah, that's me.
I like writing and this is very specific to the music I write. I like writing what I call the oh no part. And the oh no part for me is when I get to a part in my music and I'm playing it back for myself and I go, oh no. because then I either do something that I think was like too sad. For instance, a good example of an oh no part for me is how, if any of you have heard my song Witness, which I wrote it as a demo for Mako V3 English. At the end of the last chorus, Mako goes, as you move on to a place far away from me, and then she stretches out me, and then she goes, ah. And as she's doing that, Kaito comes in and starts singing Rose Plus Thorn, which is the demo I did for him for Zero G, or for for Crypto Future Media for his V3. And when I remember when I was playing that back, when his voice comes in, I knew it was happening because I wrote the song. But then it ended up, they sounded so good together that I just went, oh no. and it's generally I really like writing oh no parts that end up hitting me emotionally, which you think it's your own music, you're not going to cry at your own song, are you? And then it's like, yes I am, leave me alone, don't touch me. So yeah, that's my favorite. I like writing that oh no moment.
I cry at my own music, but for very different reasons.
Same. I cry when I'm writing music because I don't want to do it. You start and then you get to a place where you're like, oh, this is so good, this is so fun, and then you like hit this wall and then you're like, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, now it stopped being easy. Yeah.
It was going so well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, I'm gonna try and very succinctly and quickly answer the how do you mix screamo. Depends. Okay. Like I'm gonna be that guy and say screamo isn't a genre. So define your genre first, and then it depends on how you mix. Lots of forms of metal have very different, like, the ways they play stuff like guitars.
Isn't it like an umbrella term? Screamo?
Yeah, which makes it very difficult to give you like specific tips, because power metal has a different like EQ profile to doom metal, which has a different profile to prog metal, which has a different profile to like metalcore. Like that, each like little subgenre has its own aesthetic to it.
Yeah.
There are some really good like general tips that I could give you, which is like, as you're heading into something like a chorus, you can do what's called double or triple tracking, where you record the vocalist 2 or 3 times, pull everything into sync, and then you've got 3 audio takes that you play simultaneously, and it really beefs up the voice. You'll do a lot of pitch correction and like time warping to get them all like pretty much the same. But it doesn't mean they sound exactly the same. So when you layer them, it becomes very powerful, and that's a really good way to give metal vocalists like this authority in the mix when you've got these really loud drums and these really loud guitars. Drums, you want your kick drum to be clicky, which is like a boost. I can't remember where. I think it's like in the 1000 hertz region. So that you get like the beta head hitting the drum, and it makes that sound. And it has this click to it instead of it all just being thud. And you'll want to really like compress your kick drum and make it very tight, because if you're in like the genres of metal where they do a lot of double pedaling, having this like flabby kick drum just building up on itself will sound rubbish. So define what genre of like metal music you're in first, and then find the aesthetic tips that you need to mix that genre. Because like post-hardcore could be considered screamo because it has screamed or growled vocals in it, but it's not the same as like metalcore, which is really different. So that's sort of that thing. Any more questions, guys? Throw them into the hashtag, or the wall is probably the biggest problem for me. Yeah, shall we talk really quickly about getting around creative blocks? Just before we sort of do a last Q&A and sign off.
Well, I mean, there's not much I personally can really say is what happens. You just kind of have to really force yourself through it because of a deadline, usually.
Mm-hmm.
You got to respect the deadline.
You do.
I also think that inspiration and stuff is something that it's something that you can develop. So if you make yourself think creatively for 30 minutes a day and you get into that sort of a habit, you're going to be a little more prepared. But when it just comes, which is what I try to do, I think, usually with just piano music, and a lot of it ends up sounding the same. But when it comes to like an art block, and I usually try to use those little 30-minute piano writing song sessions just to see if I can get myself through it, the art block. But, well, music, art, whatever, the block. But that's usually what I would try or suggest. It's just to keep consistent and power through things. If you can't work on the lyrics of a song that you are, running out of time on, then try rethinking some of the lyrics. Like if I'm stuck on a line, I'll be like, okay, well, let me look at the lyrics that I've made before, see what direction I want to do this in. If this is not going to go hand in hand with the direction that I want it to go in, then maybe I should rewrite the line before that or the line after that. And it's really about picking and choosing and knowing when to call it quits on certain aspects of a song or to replace a certain song. It just really depends. It's a case-by-case basis usually for me.
That's fair enough. I tend to... So I get stuck on, like, chord progressions most. So yeah, I sort of end up falling into the same trap of, like, I like this chord progression, so I use it. Or, like, what I've recently realised is that I don't use... I use triads, like 1, 3, and 5 in the scale. And that's sort of all I use. An occasional, like, I'll add a 7 or I'll add a 9, depending on how fun and jazzy I'm going to be. But, like, I looked at myself, I looked at, like, the music I was writing, I was like, I never use 1, 4, 5s, and I never use 6th chords, and I don't use these, like, these chords with suspensions in the more main, like, if I sit down to write, like, specifically write classical music, I will use them because I know how to use them in the context of classical music. In, like, going back to that theory thing of, like, I know how it's prescribed to be used, so I feel comfortable using it. But I don't ever translate that to, like, my more, like, mainstream fun writing. So I've taken to, like, if I'm working on, like, if I get stuck on a chord, I'll walk over to my piano and just pick 4 notes. Like, I just close my eyes, hit 4 notes, transpose it into the key that I'm working in, and then shuffle things around until something sounds about right. And I can just end up with, like, some weird chords, but it works. I got sent a chord sheet recently. I looked at it, I was like, because I was doing a piano part for someone, I was like, this chord sheet is really cool. Like, the progressions are all really cool, and they're all really unique chords, and they flow well. I never would have thought of writing them in the way they've been used. So, yeah, that just hitting random notes and transposing it into the key you're using, and then, like, working it in. Once I do that, and I feel like I've unlocked some, like, flavour in the music, then I tend to get kickstarted again. After sort of getting past that hump, I think a lot of it is, like, just breaking that wall, and then things start to flow again. Yeah, have you got any sort of tips for it, Aki?
Basically almost exactly what CN said is, there are certain songs that I eventually come to accept where I'm like, I'm never going to finish this. I've hit a dead screen with this song where I know for a fact this is not going to get finished because it's either not coming out the way I want it to, it's not encapsulating what I want it to do, and I know that I can do it better. So oftentimes when I hit a song like that, then I will say, you're going into my storage folder. Maybe I'll come back to you, but I'm not going to force myself. For me, it's finding that level of forcing yourself through it and also determining when one song is not going to be finished or is not going to be worked on, and then deciding, okay, that's not going to happen. Let me start over and do something new. And oftentimes when I do that, the second song ends up being the one that I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I was looking for. I just needed to stop obsessing over that one song that just was not working for me. Maybe I'll come back to it, but now I have this song that I can continue. So it's even levels of powering through it and then also knowing when it's not going to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you're going to compose a lot of music in your life, and some of it is just not going to get finished. And it's okay. Just know when to realize that and when to start anew.
Yeah. I think also, like, sometimes you'll hit a roadblock because a part doesn't sound right. And it can be as simple as move that part to a different instrument and see what happens. There was this, I wrote this track for one of the Time and Space videos. And it's like this little, like jazz lounge track. I started out writing on piano because that's the instrument that I can play like smooth jazz with. I started playing, I was like, okay, this is a chord and this is a groove and I like this. I just was like, I got it written down. And I was like, I don't know how I can flesh this out. Like, I've got the drums doing the shuffle groove, and I've got the piano. Like, I need a double bass in here. So I deleted the left hand of the keyboard, shunt that onto the double bass, and rewrite a keyboard left hand because it worked better on the double bass.
Yeah.
And suddenly I've got this extra voice in the mix. I'm like, oh, okay, well now I can add in a horn section because, now this sounds right again and I've rewritten the parts. The horn section can come in, so rewrite the horn section. And yeah, like it's just, sometimes it's just a case of like moving the instruments around, seeing what sticks. Yeah. That's also another good way. Another key way, but I think we'll talk about it next time because it's its own topic. Is like setting yourself like this target to write like a project, and then using software and stuff that you're just not familiar with and don't know how to use. Because suddenly you have to do everything like backwards and sideways.
Yeah.
And it can it really refreshes your writing process. So like using different software can really help. Although that isn't an excuse to go and use Audacity.
Yeah. There's no excuse. How dare you?
Excuse.
There's no excuse.
What is, you have some audacity to be using Audacity.
Right, well, Aki's off the podcast.
Oh, this is the fastest I've ever lost a job.
Oh, you.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just trying to think of like other ways that you can, kickstart that.
Listen to stuff you like. Honestly, listen to stuff that you like.
Yeah, and like, listen to something you like. Try and write it out. Try and write something that you like out. Like pick like a guitar part or a bass part of a song you like. Write that out
And let yourself be inspired. Yeah.
and alter it, and understand how it works, and then change it. So it fits your music. Like yeah, I've definitely used that a couple of times. Like either I've done it on purpose or I've done it by accident. But I've ended up writing someone else's part and being like, oh, I need to change that. But because you have like this structure to work off, changing it up feels a lot easier than than staring at like a blank slate. Yeah, but I think we also, interestingly enough, with the we did discuss this at one point, but we'll talk about like legalities in music at some point as well, like remixing, sampling, what's copyright, what's not, because there's a lot of people getting sued in the music industry at the moment.
That's interesting. That's a really good topic. I like that.
Maybe for episode 3.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah,
I think we'll do it for next episode because there's a lot of people being sued at the moment, and it's really interesting the kind of cases that are being brought up. So yeah, super interesting. Who was it recently that I mentioned to you?
Oh, my legs are so itchy. Sorry, I keep itching myself. Keep going. Sorry.
Did I mention to you that Ed Sheeran was being sued recently?
Yes, you said that, and a couple, and then like 2 other people. But
yeah.
We should probably save that for next time, though, because if we say it now, then everybody could be like, "What?" And then we'll have to go into it.
Yeah.
We'll be here for another 3 hours.
Yeah, there's some very high profile like court cases going on that are setting a lot of precedents in like how music is copyrighted in the future. And it's a really interesting topic, and I think we'll do a proper deep dive on it. Like we'll do like a proper hour on it at some point, because it is fascinating. Like it's a really interesting topic. But that could take us right back into classical music, guys.
Dun dun dun!
You'll have to learn about Baroque compositional styles.
Oh gosh, that's an adventure. I'm ready
but if
for.
It's not Baroque, don't fix it. It's a Beauty and the Beast joke. I apologize.
I wasn't joking when I said.
Oh, I know.
Just get your money's worth.
Completely serious.
Right, guys. If you have any more questions, we are going to take one last quickfire round, and then we're going to sign off for the night. Again, really sorry we started late, but sometimes you've just got to throw a computer through a window to make it work. So yeah, send us any questions. Can be big, small, can be super detailed, not detailed at all, and we will answer them. Speaking of classical music, what is your favourite orchestral VST? In my case, it's East West Symphonic Orchestra so far, but I'm curious. Great question.
There's one right now. I don't know if I would necessarily call it classical, but it's traditional. It's called Era 2.
The Era series is great.
Yeah, I love it. I want it so bad, but I can't afford it right now. But yeah, the Era series, just with the mandolins and the violins and the flute instruments, fantastic.
So do you have like any go-to like classical VSTs or like traditional instrument VSTs?
Yeah, I need to find out what the hell my violins are called.
Okay, I can name drop like 5 or 6 off the top of my head. So like, I used East West when I was in university, and East West is amazing. Like, cannot knock it at all. It can be a little bit like CPU heavy sometimes, and I'm not like a super fan of the interface, but the sound quality is amazing.
West is really good. They have this thing called Composer Cloud where I think you pay like $20 a month and you get like a whole selection of instruments that they have, and you can use them and like kind of rent them. It's really cool.
Yeah, like the Composer Cloud's a subscription based service. Very much like the Slate Mix Bundle or Splice. It's a good way to get some really high quality instruments. And it means that if you're working on a project for a set number of months and then you're not going to use it again for a while, you don't have to pay like thousands of dollars or however many £100 to get them and then never use them again.
I found the violins.
Yeah, go on.
They're called a Friedlander, and they're like Friedlander violin, and they're the ones that there's this music group called Millie or Mealy. I don't know how it's pronounced, but this is the violin that they use in their music, and I would have never known it was a synth. I'm still at that part where it's still like it sounds like a really like a synth, but when you listen to them use it, it sounds great. So I'm working on that.
I do love Millie.
Yeah, it's my favorite violin I've ever had, and unfortunately it's contact, so that kind of makes it a little bit slower to work with. But it is so good and so clear, and I've had a lot of different violin VSTs that I've tried. None of them I've really liked as much as this one, so I would highly suggest the Friedlander violin. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
There's some good suggestions in the chat, like Sonatina Symphonic Orchestra, Vasilian Studio Chambers Orchestra 2. So I can't remember like what sort of price ranges these are in, so forgive me if I start spouting some really top end stuff. So there's
from your personal collection,
from
of
my
course.
personal collection. Yeah. Let me show you my plugin library. No, so there's a company called Red Room Audio that does this contact instrument, and it's you can use it with the free contact player. It's a contact player instrument. Called Palette, which is they call it a symphonic sketchpad, and it really is like it's a quick and dirty way of getting like full symphony ideas out really fast, but it sounds awesome, and it comes with loads of expansions, and it comes with loads of like cinematic tools as well. So if you're like writing trailer music and stuff, you've suddenly got loads of sound effects and Brahms and everything else to pop in there. So yeah, Red Room Audio Palette is really, really good, and I've actually used that a few times. There's VSL, Vienna Sonic Library, I think it is. That's, I think, really expensive, but it's really good. Yeah, VSL's great. There was a series of... That's the wrong mouse. There was a series of orchestral libraries that I really wanted to pick up, and I couldn't get them for some reason. I'm going to try and find them now. But yeah, like East West is a really like solid contender in like in terms of like top end. They will always give you like the polished Hollywood sound. So if you want something a bit more like something super traditional and like chamber orchestra-y, or something a bit more rough and ready, then it might not be the tone for you. But if you want something like cinematic quality straight out of the box, then East West is really good. Yeah. Any more? Just trying to catch up with chat.
Yeah, all I'm saying is it's a synth. It's a
synth.
Yeah.
It's a synth.
Yeah.
The rock and a bass guitar. Yeah. I saw Marvin's back in the chat. Marvin wished to talk music at some point. Yeah, I'm back up in the mixing section now. I'm going to try and find these products quickly. Just bear me 2 moments. Virtual instruments. Because they were really good, and I remember really wanting them. And I'm going to kick myself if I don't find them again. Oh, there is a company called Cinematique Instruments. They do really good. They do really good like orchestral stuff as well. They're worth looking to. And of course, there's Garatan, which is more of a budget one, but it's still like bang for buck. It's pretty good. Garatan Personal Orchestra is really good. I'm not going to be able to find it in time. And we're just going to sit with dead air for ages while I search for it. And it's going to be horrible. But it's now frustrating me. Ah, there we go.
Alright.
Cine Samples. Cine Samples is the one I'm thinking of. They also do really, really good. They also do really, really good orchestral libraries.
Yeah, that is good. That's good.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, Cine Samples libraries are really, really nice. Yeah, I was very upset when I couldn't get them. But they're also quite expensive, so I can't afford them. It's more the point I was getting at. Cine
Of
Samples,
course,
if
these
you
are all
want to hit
from
me
your
up,
personal
then-
collection.
Yeah, yes, from my personal collection of plugins. Cool.
All right.
Yeah. It seems like you guys have run out of questions for us, which I'm surprised at, but quite frankly, that's okay because it's almost 3 o'clock here and I'm really tired.
Yeah.
Like a trooper. Yeah, we'll throw any last minute questions into the chat while we sign off. And yeah. So, actually, no, before we do that, what kind of. Have you guys got any albums you want to shout out in the last few minutes that we've got that you're listening to?
The last thing I listened to, and I really, really like it, is the it's the soundtrack. Again, I'm on a soundtrack kick for a Bollywood film called Rajirao and Mastani, or Rajirao Mastani, and the music in it is absolutely fantastic, and it's unlike anything I'd ever listened to before. So I've been listening to that.
Nice. Sian, you've got any albums that are earworms at the moment?
Nero's Day in Disneyland,
Yeah.
and they have an album, and it's really good. And I don't know if Nero's Day at Disneyland is the name of the artist or the name of the album, but it's some really wacky, funky, cool sound incorporating music. It's weird. I'll send some links. It's really good. I would highly recommend them.
Cool.
Yeah, that's all I've really listened to lately. And you know,
I'm just looking through my phone library at the moment. I'm listening to an album called Palms by Thrice, which has just been released, which is super good. Really recommend that if you like your rock stuff. It's rock, but it's like non-generic. It's really nice. The writing's very good. The vocalist is great. So yeah, really recommend Palms by Thrice. Palms as in the hand, palm. I've also got this EP from an artist called We Are All Astronauts, which I got back in like March, I want to say. I listened to it a bit, and I've just been really. I've come back on it with a vengeance. It's like this proper ambient EP, which is like 6 tracks long or 5 tracks long, really, and it's really good. Like it's just solid ambient music. I really recommend checking it out. So artist called We Are All Astronauts has been on my list. Other than that, my usual suspects like Between the Buried and Me and Tesseract have been up there. And I've fallen off the Kamikaze album by Eminem. There are still really good tracks on there that I'll go back and listen to, but the hype didn't last for me. So
yeah.
Update on that. Yeah. Soon, but what have you guys got planned for V5? I can't tell you yet. It's not in the announcement.
One day you'll know.
Yeah, one day. It's not in the announcement next week. I'll let you know that now. But as soon as I can tell you, I promise I will. We need to kidnap Garrick and make him spill the info. Please don't kidnap me. My parents and my family will be very upset. I have a job to go to as well. Yeah, no. Just rehashing some news. Big announcements next week from Zero G. One is Vocaloid related. One is a new release that isn't a Vocaloid. Both of them are really cool. I wish I could tell you tonight, but I can't. As I say, the stars didn't align for it. So, big announcements next week. It's the end of the Zero G autumn sale as well. So there's loads of like deals going on at the moment. So now's a really good time to pick stuff up. We don't have any plans for Black Friday yet. So read into that.
I guess that's coming up, huh?
November, yeah. Don't start me on it. don't do it. Black Friday was chaos in this office last year. It was actually madness. Because we've got time and space in the office as well. It was nuts. So yeah. But then then it's Christmas afterwards. So we'll be doing stuff for Christmas. Probably some giveaways and such. But like yeah, this will be like the last sort of saley thing for a while, I think. And Vocaloids are 30% off until September 1st. I extended
November 1st or October 1st.
October
Sorry.
1st. September 1st. October 1st. Yeah, Vocaloids.
You thought you could get that deal? You're wrong.
Go back in time. Yeah, no, they're 30% off for the next few days. We were going to originally run it as like a 24-hour thing, and we said now a few extra days, let people get the chance to get them. So yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, Vocaloid's 30% off at the moment. And I didn't really highlight the discount code, but 28ZGP09 is the discount code, 20% off.
Right underneath my name.
Right underneath Aki, 20% off everything in store apart from Vocaloids and new releases. So releases in the last 6 months. Because I can't give you 30% off and 20% off. Yeah. Can't do that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So yeah, last questions. I kind of made a big stupid and bought V5 on release day, and I haven't had a time to write originals with V5 yet. Yeah, trust me. Like, I think
if you're going to use it, it's worth it.
Yeah.
That's how I
Yes.
justify my purchases.
yeah, that's it. If you bought it, then use it. And like the editor's super good now. Like I think it is because I didn't use V4 or V3 or V2, so. It's really accessible for me, but I understand that some people don't like it. But that's me. Yeah. That's my take on it. Rip coupon stacking. Yeah, sorry. We thought about that first. Christmas sales, that's when I got Sonica back in my... yeah, solid 50% off Vocaloids. Probably never going to happen. It's just like the cost involved just doesn't work that way. Sorry, but 30% is like the top we can do on them. It's like the top we can do on Ethra as well. Like Ethra and Vocaloids are like the two that we have on Fathers. Like you'll probably never get anything more than 30% because it's just hard for us to do. So yeah. Cool. Right, let's sign off. I'm gonna go to bed. I'm really tired and I still have to drive home.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for sticking with us through the technical difficulties.
Yeah,
we will make sure that does not happen next time. This is a new podcast, so there's going to be bumps in the road. So we will definitely make sure that does not happen next.
Yeah. Thank you for sticking around. I'd say I've gone through 2 computers now. This is the best we could do. I'll make sure that it's a bit more stable for next time, even if I have to bring my home setup here.
He's so dedicated.
I'll do it. I'll dismantle my study at home and I'll just bring it here if I have to. Anything to make it work. Yes, Queen.
Yes, Queen.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Second episode of the Zero G podcast. We'll wrap up now.
Thank you.
My name's Garrick. I'm the Zero G admin. You can follow us at 0_G_limited. My personal one, which isn't on screen, is at GarrickW6, or at least I hope it is. Otherwise, I'm using someone else's Twitter. Quite frank. Yeah, you guys do your shout outs to your socials. Tell them what you've got going on, and we'll wrap up.
I'm Aki Glancy on Twitter, and I'm working on my next album. Please look forward to that. It's called Ghosts of Artificial Trees. I am also just opened up my Bilibili and Weibo accounts for the Chinese website. So if you want to follow me there, that's where you can find me. Or you can always tweet me at AkiGlancy, or you can email me at akiglancy@hotmail.com.
Cool.
Okay. And I'm Crusher P, and I wrote Echo. Thanks so much.
Damn it. You pumped me. God damn. Okay, right. Thank you for joining us.
That's it.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for
Bye.
coming.
Thank you for joining us on the Zero G podcast. That's it from us. Good night.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.